Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of history's most sleep-deprived realities, the life of a single mother in the 1920s. Not the glamorous Art Deco, speakeasy sparkling jazz was invented so we could vibe version. No, we're talking about real, actual 1920s single motherhood, the kind held together with starch, grit, and the quiet hope that your children will stop fighting over a tin lunch pail for 5 minutes. So before we start, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you honestly enjoy drifting to sleep while learning why the past was basically a continuous endurance marathon. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it currently is. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise. Get comfortable, really comfortable, because you're about to travel a century backward, where comfort was theoretical and childcare counted as full contact combat. Let's pose a few questions to settle you in. Have you ever wondered how a woman managed work, childcare, housework, social judgment, and the Great Depression all before 8 a.m.? How many cups of weak coffee does it take to survive a commute on foot? How do you cook dinner when half your ingredients have expired and the other half were never fresh to begin with? Did children behave better without screens? Or were they just louder about their boredom? And how many times can a person patch a pair of stockings before the stockings file a complaint? And now congratulations, you've just woken up in 1924. Your shoes pinch, your rent is overdue, your children are arguing about who breathed wrong, and there is no caffeine strong enough to fix any of this. Good luck. You wake up to the sound of a child coughing, a neighbor's radio humming through thin walls, and the faint aroma of yesterday's coal dust still hanging in the air. Your back aches from a mattress that has all the support of a deflated pancake. It's 5:30 a.m., an hour that feels invented by your enemies. There is no alarm clock unless you count your toddler's cold or the subtle percussion of pigeons fighting over breadcrumbs outside the window. The sun hasn't bothered to show up yet, and frankly, you understand why. In the half-light, your room is a gallery of silhouettes. The chipped dresser, the lumpy quilt, a pair of socks on the floor that may or may not be sentient by now. You turn over carefully, partly to avoid waking anyone else, and partly because every joint in your body feels like it's been sleeping in a coal bin. The bed frame squeaks, a warning shot. Someone in the next room mutters. The neighbor's radio crackles again, then bursts into a tinny version of, "Yes, we have no bananas." It's an anthem for mornings when there's definitely no bananas, and probably not much else. A thin shaft of cold air snakes in from the window, because the 1920s idea of insulation is just hope for the best and wear socks to bed. You shiver and pull the covers higher, only to discover that the covers have already migrated to your youngest child, who is currently cocooned in all available blankets. Snoring contentedly and drooling on the pillow, you try to reclaim a corner of the quilt, starting a silent tug of war. You lose. The world outside is waking up in stages. Somewhere, a milk cart rattles down the street, its driver humming, oblivious to your existential crisis. Coal deliveries start early. Thuds and clatter echo down the row of houses. Someone's dog, which you've never seen but deeply resent, is already barking at nothing in particular. In 1920s urban neighborhoods, privacy is a fantasy, and so is quiet. You listen for the telltale sounds of your children plotting in the next room. This is how you know you're truly awake, by the suspenseful silence of kids about to do something regrettable. Soon, they'll come thundering in, demanding breakfast, socks, and answers to cosmic questions like, why is jam only for toast and not for spoons? You take inventory of your body. Your head aches, a familiar blend of too little sleep and too much thinking. Your hands are rough from laundry and dishwater. Your feet sore from yesterday's walk to the grocer. And your lower back is considering unionizing for better conditions. It's cold, Not the cozy, crisp cold of modern central heating, but the kind that clings to your bones and makes you question the meaning of blankets. The stove in the corner is still cold, and the coal bucket is, as always, lighter than it should be. You could get up and start the fire, or you could pretend, for another 2 minutes, that this day might start itself. But children, like time, are relentless. Soon, little feet hit the linoleum, tiny voices call your name, and you are officially outnumbered by beings with more energy than good sense. You sigh, roll out of bed, and your bare feet hit the floor, a sensation best described as Arctic linoleum meets existential dread. You quickly locate your slippers, or, in a pinch, yesterday's newspaper. You move quietly, listening for the telltale drip of a leaky tap, the rustle of mice in the pantry, and the soft whine of the kettle, reminding you that hot water is never a guarantee. In the half-dark, you light the stove, coaxing the first reluctant flames to life, and watch your breath fog in the chilly air. Already, the house is filling with the scents and sounds of morning. Children's coughs, the creak of wood, the distant bell of a streetcar, and that ever-present background aroma, coal dust, laundry soap, and a hint of boiled cabbage from last night's dinner. It's not glamorous, but it's real, and it's yours. You don't get a gentle start to the day. You get a running leap every morning into noise, cold, responsibility, and the quiet, unbreakable hope that maybe, just maybe, tonight you'll get the covers to yourself. And so, another day in the 1920s begins, not with a sunrise, but with a small, relentless chorus. Mama, Mama, where's breakfast? And just like that, you're up. You shuffle into the kitchen, a generous term for a stove, a table, and one angry teapot, and begin assembling breakfast. Oatmeal again. The children respond with the enthusiasm of stockbrokers watching the market crash. It's a routine that would make a Broadway stage manager weep. First, you wrestle open the tin of oats, whose lid has learned to resist all human effort. The oats tumble out like they know they're headed for disappointment. Your youngest is already making a face that says, "Is it too late to join a circus that serves pancakes?" You check the bread box, just in case a miracle happened overnight, and it decided to refill itself. It did not. There is one end piece of bread left, which is now so stale it could be registered as a weapon. Someone proposes French toast, but everyone knows the only thing French in this kitchen is the vague whiff of sadness and the occasional existential crisis. The stove groans awake. It heats unevenly, so you become a human thermostat, shuffling the saucepan around to avoid a repeat of last week's great porridge scorching. The angry teapot whistles sharply, as if to remind you that it too is not impressed with these breakfast prospects. You pour a little hot water over yesterday's tea leaves and pretend it's a fresh brew. It tastes like defeat. Milk is precious, and you ration it like it's the last barrel on a sinking ship. The children glance at the bottle hopefully, but you've mastered the ancient art of the just enough pour. Each child receives what can best be described as a suggestion of milk. One splash per bowl, just enough to turn the oatmeal a suspicious shade of grey. No one is fooled. Jam is for Sundays, and sugar is for special occasions. You do a quick mental inventory. Half a jar of jam, 1 sugar cube, and a level of patience that's already running low. You consider slicing up an apple, but the last one has gone soft in a way that's both alarming and slightly philosophical. You remember when fruit was something that came from a tree, not a lecture about budgeting. As you set the table, you notice every spoon is slightly different, one bent, one missing its handle, and one that might actually be a gravy ladle. The bowls are chipped, the napkins are wishful thinking, and the only centerpiece is the condensation running down the inside of the window. The kids stare down at their bowls like they're about to do battle. The oldest pokes her oatmeal, trying to see if it moves. The youngest launches a negotiation. Can we have something else? You remind them gently, and then less gently, that oatmeal is a hearty breakfast. You attempt to sell it with historical references, quoting advertisements about building strong bodies for a better tomorrow, but your audience remains unconvinced. There is, of course, the wild card. Sometimes a neighbor will pop by with a surprise, a bruised banana, a spare roll, or a scoop of yesterday's beans. It's 1920s breakfast roulette. And today's number is oatmeal again. The kids groan, but you both know they'll eat it. If only because hunger is the greatest motivator and there are no Pop-Tarts in this timeline. You take your own seat, noticing that somehow you always end up with the smallest bowl and the most responsibility. The kitchen hums with complaints, negotiations, and the occasional eruption of giggles when someone finds an oat shaped like a celebrity, or at least claims to. It's not relaxing, but it's real. The meal ends the way it always does. Someone claims they're still hungry, someone else spills milk, and you wonder how a single meal could create so many dirty dishes. Afterward, as you wipe the table and shoo the children toward their chores or schoolwork, you pause. Sunlight has finally crept through the pable window, catching a swirl of dust motes and making even this kitchen, this place of rationed jam and eternal oatmeal, look golden, if only for a moment. Breakfast in the 1920s isn't glamorous. It's survival, resourcefulness, and a dash of dry humor served up in chipped bowls. And somehow, despite everything, it's enough to get everyone started on another day. Dressing your kids is like dressing extremely small adults who distrust fabric. Every garment is patched at least twice. Every child insists something itches. Every sock is a philosophical compromise. The morning's first real challenge isn't breakfast. It's assembling enough clothing to send your children into the world looking at least semi-civilized. It's a process that could be marketed as a new Olympic sport. If only the judges awarded points for creativity, speed, and the ability to find a matching pair of anything before noon. You start with the oldest. She's inherited not just your stubbornness, but also her cousin's old dress, which has seen so many repairs it's basically held together by hope and an ambitious cross-stitch. There are more patches than original fabric, each one a different shade, creating a patchwork aesthetic that will someday be called vintage, but right now is just please don't look too closely. The younger ones are still half asleep, sitting slumped on the bed, staring at the wardrobe like it might jump out and dress them itself. You sort through the drawers, which mostly contain single socks and the ghosts of lost mittens. Every day is a negotiation. This shirt is too tight, those pants are too short, and that sweater smells funny. You remind everyone, gently at first and then with mounting urgency, that smelling funny is just what happens when laundry day is a once-a-week event powered by boiled water and elbow grease. Laces are the enemy. Shoelaces in the 1920s are not designed for speed. They are designed to teach patience and, possibly, break the spirit. Someone is always missing a lace, or has tied one into a knot so impressive it belongs in a sailor's manual. You wrestle with tiny, stubborn shoes, knuckles whitening, while your child wiggles and asks unanswerable questions like, "Why do feet need shoes?" And, "What if I just go barefoot forever?" Buttons, meanwhile, are a game of probability. There are never quite enough, and the ones that remain seem to have taken a vow of rebellion, refusing to fit through the holes, or just detaching entirely at the most dramatic moment. You briefly contemplate sewing on a button before breakfast. Then remember the last time you tried. and how it ended with you stabbing your own thumb and inventing new curse words. Socks are a category all their own. No pair matches, and if they do, they won't by the time you leave the house. Some have holes so big you could use them as finger puppets. You hand out socks with the solemnity of a judge, then watch as the children immediately complain. "It's scratchy," says one. "It's lumpy," says another. "This sock is looking at me funny," says the third, possibly hallucinating from oatmeal withdrawal. Getting yourself dressed is another ordeal. Your own clothes are functional at best, stubborn at worst. Your stockings sag. Your hem is uneven. And your best dress is reserved for church and the off chance that someone important might knock at the door. You consider putting on lipstick, but decide your energy is better spent finding mittens for your youngest, who has already tried to leave the house wearing a scarf and nothing else. Finally, after a flurry of commands, button wrangling, shoe wrestling, and the existential battle of the morning, everyone is, more or less, dressed. You step back to survey your work. 3 children, layered like onions, each wearing at least one item backwards and several things inside out, but they're warm, more or less covered, and officially ready to face the day, or at least the first 5 minutes of it. Dressing in the 1920s isn't about style, comfort, or even logic. It's about endurance, patching, improvisation, and a gentle acceptance that nothing will ever quite fit. And as you shepherd your mismatched little crew out the door, you find a peculiar pride in their patched knees, knotted laces, and the fact that, despite everything, you managed to get everyone dressed and out the door before noon. That, in itself, feels like a tiny, everyday miracle. You slip into a dress stiff enough to stand on its own, stockings that have seen too much, and shoes that were made before arch support was invented. Everything pinches, pulls, or threatens to rip. It's not so much getting dressed as it is climbing into a soft woven punishment. Your dress, once a cheerful print, has faded into an ambiguous greyish colour, with a texture that says industrial sandpaper. The fabric has memories, none of them are pleasant. Buttons strain, the collar digs, and the sleeves are a compromise between mobility and the faint hope you'll look respectable if the landlord drops by. You pull your stockings up gingerly, aware that the act itself could trigger a run from ankle to mid-thigh. Each stocking has a landscape of darning and near misses, and one is permanently twisted so that the seam will always show no matter how you turn it. It's an inside joke between you and the universe. You sigh, remembering a time when you imagined adulthood as a glamorous parade of outfits. Perhaps a fur stole, a string of pearls, a hat with attitude. Instead, you have the 1920s working mother's essentials. 3 serviceable dresses, a single petticoat, and a powerful dislike of rayon. The good dress stays in the back of the wardrobe for emergencies, funerals, and the remote possibility of being discovered by Hollywood. Spoiler: today is not that day. Fastening your shoes requires patience and resolve. They are leather, in the sense that cardboard is a kind of paper. They pinch in new places daily, like a traveling circus of discomfort. You do up the laces, double-check the heel, and hope that today will not be the day the sole finally gives up and peels off like a sad banana. The next step is accessorizing, which in this context means finding a belt that mostly matches your dress and hasn't turned into a sentient being. You try on a hat, but the mirror reveals a lopsided creation that looks as though it was designed by a committee of disgruntled pigeons. You wear it anyway. Hats, in this era, are a social requirement, and you are nothing if not determined to pass as respectable. even if it means pinning the brim so it doesn't obscure your only remaining good eye. A dab of powder, perhaps, or the memory of one. Lipstick, when it can be found, has usually been melted, frozen, or commandeered by a child for art purposes. You swipe on a little anyway. It's less about beauty, more about signaling to the world that you are awake and possibly in charge, even if you don't feel like it. You move through the tiny bedroom, checking the hem, straightening the collar, smoothing down your hair. If you're lucky, you'll find the comb before someone else uses it to brush the cat. If not, you tame your hair with water, hope, and some leftover resolve from last winter. Maybe you tie it back, maybe you pin it up. But either way, by lunchtime it will be working its way free like a prisoner with a file baked into a cake. Now comes the ritual of the apron. You tie it on with a practiced hand, hiding most of the dress, and, ideally, any evidence that you ever cooked, cleaned, or participated in life. The apron, paradoxically, is often the cleanest thing you own. It's the uniform of the overworked, the shield of the perpetually under-rested, the flag flown by every single mother who knows that a day can go from presentable to disaster in the time it takes a child to drop jam on the floor. Before leaving, you do a final inventory. Hair in place, dress buttoned, apron tied, shoes threatening mutiny, composure mostly intact. As you walk out the door, your outfit makes you taller, stiffer, slightly more formidable. It is less a statement of style and more a suit of armor, stitched together by necessity and stubborn pride. And as you step into the street, you remind yourself that somewhere, someone is wearing pajamas until noon, and that person is not you. Because in the 1920s, comfort is a luxury, and fashion is just another daily endurance test you never signed up for, but still pass every day. You gather your kids and head down the street, dodging trolley tracks and puddles of mysterious origin. The children walk, argue, then walk again. It's a choreography they've perfected. It's not a simple stroll. It's a carefully orchestrated parade of shoes that don't fit, hats that will be lost, and coats that seem to gain mysterious new stains every block. The sidewalks of 1920s city life are not a friendly place for a single mother with children in tow. Every step is a negotiation. You're guiding, cajoling, occasionally threatening, your words weaving between warnings about horse-drawn wagons and the promise that, yes, there will be bread and jam if everyone just keeps moving. The cold morning air wakes up your face faster than any cup of tea. Your children leap puddles with the dramatic flair of silent film stars, sometimes succeeding, sometimes arriving at the next corner with one sock already squelching. Don't step in that, you advise, but at least one child treats the suggestion as a challenge. What was once white lace peeking from under a hem is now a small, soggy sponge. You pass the local grocer, who gives you the kind of tight, sympathetic smile reserved for those clearly outnumbered by their offspring. A milkman rattles by, his wagon full of glass bottles and existential disappointment. The neighbors, already gossiping on stoops, give your family a once-over. You feel their eyes tallying every missed button and last-minute hairpin, their glances lingering just a beat too long. You pull your coat tighter and keep your chin up. Dignity is cheaper than coal, but harder to keep warm. The city is waking up. Trolleys rattle along the main street, and drivers ring bells with the zeal of people who believe sound can solve traffic. A policeman tips his hat. Children dodge each other on the sidewalk. And someone's dog, still off-leash despite local ordinances, does its part to sniff every single lunch pail within a 3-block radius. You keep your brood together with the kind of vigilance reserved for professional sheepdogs and military generals. They scatter at every window display and stop to poke at anything shiny, sticky, or potentially alive. Eyes forward, you say. But your own eyes are everywhere, counting heads, tallying mittens, and bracing for the moment someone inevitably drops a book or claims an urgent need to tie their shoe, usually as the light turns green. The final block before school is always the longest. The schoolyard is a whirlpool of children, mothers, and the occasional stray cat. Here, chaos reigns, children jostling, trading marbles, and shrieking about nothing in particular. You grip your children's hands a little tighter, run a last check for lunch pails and hats, and give one more futile attempt at smoothing hair. The school building looms, a brick fortress of discipline, chalk dust, and stern adults. The bell is already ringing, sending waves of children tumbling through the doors like it's the last lifeboat on the Titanic. You deliver a last round of kisses, lectures, and warnings about not trading sandwiches for questionable marbles. The children vanish into the crowd, blending into a swirl of wool, stockings, and infinite potential for mischief. For a moment, you stand at the gate, catching your breath. The school drop-off isn't just a transition from home to classroom. It's a test of endurance, logistics, and faith that your kids will come back with the same number of limbs and hopefully only slightly more dirt. Around you, other mothers nod, some in sympathy, some in silent solidarity, all of you united by the exhausting ballet of getting children out the door and into the world, rain or shine, mud or miracle. You turn back toward home or work, stepping carefully over the same puddles and trolley tracks, your mind already spinning through the day's next challenges. And as you walk, you realize that surviving the school drop-off in the 1920s is less about grace and more about grit. Congratulations! You've already accomplished more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day. At the school doors, the teacher greets you with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. You can feel her silently noting your children's mismatched buttons and the fact that one has jam on his ear. It's a ritual, as reliable as the sunrise or your child's ability to lose a mitten in under 60 seconds. The teacher stands guard, clipboard in hand, perfectly pressed dress, making you wonder if she owns an iron blessed by the archangel of starch. She surveys your small flock as if she's mentally filling out a daily report card on not just their arithmetic, but your entire approach to parenting. Your children file past her, attempting looks of innocence. The oldest gives a polite nod. The middle one waves with sticky fingers. And the youngest, well, he just stares at her like he's evaluating the odds of sneaking back outside for recess before 10 a.m. The teacher's gaze lingers on each one, cataloguing small sins, scuffed shoes, slightly grubby collars, hair that defies all attempts at order. It's as if she's adding up each detail and planning a strongly worded note for later. You know the look, half smile, half subtle accusation. In the 1920s, single motherhood comes with the bonus level of societal observation. The teacher is not just an educator, she's an ambassador of the community's collective expectations, channeling the opinions of every neighbor, every shopkeeper, and every nosy aunt within a 5-block radius. You wonder if she has a direct line to your landlord, or perhaps just a weekly meeting to discuss the state of your laundry. She asks after your children's health in a tone that suggests you should be giving them more fresh fruit, more cod liver oil, and probably less fun. You nod, smile, and answer all questions with the poise of a diplomat who's been awake since 5:30 and still hasn't had a full cup of tea. Yes, we're all well. Yes, everyone finished their homework. Yes, that is jam, but it's homemade. The conversation is a delicate dance. The teacher may compliment your children's reading progress, but slips in a comment about remembering to practice penmanship at home. She'll smile at your daughter's braid, but her eyes linger on the place where it unravels. You know that, later, your child will bring home a note, written in perfect cursive, suggesting improvements. The phrase "room for growth" makes an appearance at least twice a month. Other parents are lined up behind you, each receiving their own slice of morning evaluation. You catch the eyes of another mother who gives you the universal look that says, "Hang in there." It's a brief exchange of solidarity, one that transcends era and circumstance. The teacher, meanwhile, is already mentally moving to the next family, her internal ledger ever updating. Still, despite the scrutiny, you know this routine is just another test. You've faced bigger challenges than passive-aggressive encouragement and subtle critiques. Your children have shoes mostly. Their hair is brushed, sort of, and their stomachs are full of oatmeal, which is more than you can say for some mornings. If the only casualty is a smudge of jam, you call that a win. With the children safely inside, the teacher gives you one final glance. It is equal parts stern, sympathetic, and, on some days, almost approving. You nod your farewell, adjust your collar, and walk away, resisting the urge to check your own face for stray breakfast. On your way home, or to work, you replay the encounter in your head. Did you sound flustered? Did you forget anything? You remind yourself that the teacher, for all her starched authority, is just another person with her own worries, perhaps her own stack of unpaid bills and unwritten letters. Maybe, at the end of the day, you both just want the children to come home with more knowledge than jam. And so, you walk on, chin up, steps steady, ready to face the next gauntlet in your day. Because in the 1920s, being a single mother isn't just about keeping your children alive and mostly clean. It's about passing 1,000 little, unspoken tests every single morning, in front of the sharpest eyes in town. Your commute involves walking, more walking, and the occasional streetcar ride pressed between strangers who smell like tobacco and wet wool. You mentally rehearse the tasks waiting for you. It's early, but the city is already awake. Trucks rumble over cobblestones, bakers toss flour into the air, and paperboys compete to see who can shout headlines with the least regard for indoor voices. You join the tide of workers flowing toward factories, offices, shops, and street corners, all clutching bags, lunch tins, or, if they're lucky, a scarf not yet claimed by a gust of wind or a child's sticky hands. The sidewalk is a gauntlet. You sidestep puddles, hop over the remnants of a horse's morning commute, and dodge trolley tracks that appear to have been designed as a social experiment in tripping people. Every few blocks, a truck backfires, launching a chorus of startled pigeons and at least one expletive. You try to keep a brisk pace, but your shoes, selected for durability rather than speed, make every step a reminder that comfort is a luxury for people with time to rest. You round the corner, passing a line of men outside the employment office. Some nod. Others stare ahead, hands in pockets, faces tight with the knowledge that jobs are scarce and winter is not in a forgiving mood. The air is sharp with the scent of coal smoke, the city's unofficial perfume. Your fingers go numb, then tingle, and you tuck your hands inside your sleeves, rehearsing your week's budget and silently praying the price of bread holds steady. If you're lucky, the streetcar screeches to a halt just as you reach the corner. If not, you wait, shoulder to shoulder with a shifting crowd, all of you pretending not to notice the collective lack of deodorant. The streetcar finally arrives, and you wedge yourself inside, surrounded by a patchwork of hats, scarves, and elbows. Every seat is filled. You dangle from a leather strap, balancing your bag in one hand, hoping nobody sneezes in your direction. The ride is a crash course in intimacy with strangers. Someone's overcoat brushes your leg. Someone else is humming a tune through their nose. A toddler, miraculously awake at this hour, stares at you with deep suspicion while chewing on a biscuit the size of his face. The conductor moves through the car, punching tickets and grumbling about standing room only, a phrase that here means no room for anyone, ever, under any circumstances. If the windows are open, you get a taste of fresh city air, equal parts exhaust, bread, and whatever mysterious ingredient lingers from last night's rain. You peer out, watching shopkeepers set out their wares, students darting between buildings, and the ever-present flurry of activity that marks a city determined to carry on, no matter what the economy or weather report says. At each stop, passengers shuffle in and out. You inch closer to the exit, calculating your route for maximum efficiency. Shortest distance, fewest interactions, lowest chance of encountering an overly chatty neighbor who wants to discuss the price of coal for 15 blocks. You check your pockets twice for your lunch and weekly tram pass. Then remember, as always, that the most important thing to carry is the mask of composure. The one that says, "I am fine, everything is under control," even if you feel more like a juggler who just dropped all her balls. Finally, the car lurches to your stop. You disembark in a flurry of coats and scarves, feet hitting the sidewalk with renewed determination. The last few blocks are a brisk march past offices, warehouses, and the occasional alley cat that regards you with the quiet judgment of someone who has never had to clock in on time. You arrive at work, already tired, already proud of yourself, and already half dreaming of the cup of weak coffee that will be your reward for simply making it this far. The commute isn't glamorous or easy, but you do it anyway, every day, powered by the kind of stubborn hope that makes history and, occasionally, gets you to work on time. Inside the factory, machines roar, belts rattle, and the air tastes faintly of metal. You work quickly and carefully, because one wrong move means injury and lost wages. Your shift begins the moment you step through the door, greeted by the clatter of 1,000 moving parts and the unmistakable perfume of sweat, oil, and ambition. The factory floor is its own tiny universe. Cavernous, echoing, and always just a little too warm or a little too cold. Never anything in between. Ceiling fans turn lazily overhead, offering the faintest suggestion of relief, but mostly serving as a reminder that somewhere, someone is in charge of ventilation, and they're not in this room. You find your spot among the rows of workbenches, clock in with a mechanical thud, and tie on your apron. It smells faintly of last week's machine oil, and more than faintly of the boiled cabbage your coworker swears by for lunch. There's no time for chit-chat. The whistle blows, and the assembly line lurches to life like a creature waking from a nap. Grumpy, hungry, and ready to demand your full attention. The noise is constant, layered, and overwhelming. Machines thump and clatter, gears grind, belts whip past your elbows. You learn quickly to tune out the sound and focus on the rhythm, the repetition of hands, tools, and materials moving in an endless loop. You don't need a watch. You can count the hours by the growing ache in your feet and the steady accumulation of grime under your fingernails. Every task has its own hazards. Some days you rivet parts together, fingers nimble and precise, aware that even a moment's distraction could send the tool crashing down or a scrap of metal flying in an exciting, lawsuit-adjacent direction. Other days, you pack boxes or sort bolts until your mind wanders to what's for dinner, or why your shoes always seem to shrink a little more by lunchtime. There's always someone yelling instructions over the din, a supervisor with the supernatural ability to spot a yawn at 50 paces and interpret it as a sign of sabotage. Safety is, in theory, a priority. In practice, the rules are more like suggestions, and everyone has a story about the day someone tried to speed things up and ended up with a hand bandaged in rags and a stern reminder that accidents are docked from your pay. You wrap your knuckles in scraps of cloth, double knot your headscarf, and get on with it. Breaks are brief, loud, and sacred. You and your fellow workers huddle over battered lunch pails, trading bits of bread, a boiled egg, or, on truly special days, an apple. You sit on upturned crates, backs against the wall, boots propped on whatever's handy, and share complaints in the universal language of the overworked and undercaffeinated. The conversation is always the same. Pay, bosses, shoes, the price of coal, and how someone's cousin once found a much better job, which may or may not exist. Then, it's back to the line, back to the thunder and grind. You work with a focus born of necessity, hands moving automatically, mind drifting between counting bolts and daydreaming about a world where work is less dangerous and lunch is more than a rumor. By mid-afternoon, your back aches, your hair is full of dust, and your thoughts have turned to how you'll stretch tonight's dinner into tomorrow's breakfast. When the whistle finally blows to signal the end of your shift, you feel the day's weight settle into your bones. You wipe your hands, brush off your skirt, and trade tired glances with the other women, each of you a little more worn, but still standing. Outside, the city noise seems gentle by comparison. You step back into the street, lungs filling with cool air, and promise yourself you'll never take silence for granted again. Factory work in the 1920s isn't for the faint of heart or weak of hearing, but you do it day after day because the work pays, the bills wait, and your children need shoes that fit, even if you never will. If you're a typist, every day is a symphony of clacking keys, paper cuts, and pretending your supervisor's jokes are funny. Your spine files a complaint every hour on the hour. The office is a cathedral to paperwork and propriety. High ceilings, squeaky floors, and a faint but permanent smell of coffee, ink, and ambition. Desks form neat little rows, each one topped with an ocean of memos, sharpened pencils, and the terrifyingly powerful Underwood typewriter. You take your seat as the room's morning hush is shattered by the staccato chorus of typing. The keys don't so much tap as slam, making it sound as if a flock of geese has learned Morse code and become extremely anxious about deadlines. Your fingers ache before you've even started. Calloused from carbon copies, ink-stained from refilled ribbons. Each letter you type must be perfect. There's no autocorrect, just the threat of starting over. The eraser is a crumbly little disc that's already worn a hole through half your paperwork. The carbon paper, meanwhile, exists solely to stain your hands and produce faint, barely legible duplicates destined for someone's to ignore pile. The boss arrives precisely on the hour, carrying a sheaf of new orders and a fresh supply of witticisms harvested from a book titled something like Jokes for the Office Gentleman. He is immaculately dressed, with a pencil mustache, and the certainty that every request is a simple one. Just retype this stack before lunch. Would you? You smile tightly, nod, and wonder if anyone has ever been buried under a mountain of unfiled invoices. There's a constant undercurrent of anxiety. The knowledge that every word is being read, every mistake scrutinized, every sigh measured. The supervisor is always lurking just out of sight, appearing only to comment on the neatness of your margins or to inquire why there's an extra comma on page 4. You are both indispensable and completely replaceable, an existential paradox that haunts every woman in the typing pool. By mid-morning, your shoulders are hunched, your eyes have glazed over, and your fingers dance a complicated ballet over the keys. The sound of someone's carriage return becomes the world's shortest victory celebration, a tiny bell signifying you've made it one more line without error. The phone rings sporadically, loud and sudden, and you answer with your office voice, the one an octave higher than your normal tone, full of forced cheer and the vague hope no one asks you to take dictation. Lunch break arrives, and you escape to the staff lounge, a windowless room with a table, 6 chairs, and a coffee pot that's been brewing the same grounds since the Harding administration. The other women share sandwiches and swap office gossip, discussing everything from the new filing clerk's mysterious past, she's from Cleveland, to whether or not it's true that the vice president has a gold tooth. Someone brings a crossword. You all take turns filling in answers, occasionally cheating, always careful not to leave any trace for the boss to find. The afternoon stretches out, full of more reports, more letters, and more careful corrections with your battered eraser. Light coming in through the windows turns golden, dust motes swirling like confetti from a very boring parade. Every so often, a breeze brings the distant sound of streetcars and life happening outside, reminders that the world is bigger than carbon paper and quarterly summaries. As 5 o'clock approaches, the office transforms. Shoulders relax, conversations start to bubble up, and people eye the clock with an intensity usually reserved for sporting events. When the boss finally says, "That'll be all for today," it's as if someone just signed the Treaty of Versailles. You straighten your desk, gather your things, and stretch, feeling every bone in your back realign in protest. You leave with a sense of accomplishment, small, hard-earned, and tinged with relief. Office work isn't glamorous. It's repetition, precision, patience, and the constant dance of pleasing people who don't always notice. But you do it because the paycheck means food, rent, shoes for the kids, and the hope that tomorrow the boss's joke will at least be a new one. Lunch is a cold sandwich eaten in 10 minutes on a bench. You think about nothing and everything simultaneously. Your stomach negotiates peace with stale bread. There's something profoundly unceremonious about the midday meal when you're a working mother in the 1920s. You claim a spot on a wooden bench, if you're lucky, outside in the sun. If you're not, on a wobbly crate in a break room that doubles as a broom closet and smells vaguely of soup and wet galoshes. The sandwich is the same as yesterday. And the day before, 2 slices of bread, one of which may have come from a parallel universe, where freshness is illegal, and a filling that has been through more rationing than you have. If you're lucky, there's a thin slice of cheese. If you're very lucky, the cheese is not actively fighting back. You take a careful bite and look around at the cast of characters sharing your lunchtime stage. There's the woman from payroll, already halfway through a boiled egg and her daily complaint about her husband's snoring. There's the fellow mother from your neighborhood, dabbing her forehead with a handkerchief and counting the minutes until the whistle blows. Everyone's chewing with the intensity of people who know this meal has to last them until evening, and the conversation's light, drifting from the weather to how someone's cousin once met a radio celebrity at Woolworth's. You glance at the clock. 10 minutes, maybe 12 if you chew slowly. Time moves differently here. Fast when you want to rest, slow when you're desperate to leave. You keep one eye on the door, always listening for a boss's footsteps or the start of a new shift. Breaks are strictly timed, and no one wants to risk being docked for a sandwich that overstays its welcome. The air smells of old lunch, coffee grounds, and the faint, perpetual tang of machine oil or office ink. You sip from a chipped mug of coffee or weak tea, the liquid having spent more time contemplating flavor than actually acquiring any. If you're feeling wild, you add a splash of milk, rationed from home and guarded like state secrets. It's not gourmet, but it's hot, and sometimes hot is enough. You unwrap an apple that's seen better days, check it for bruises, and eat around the worst spots. There's always someone nearby with something marginally better, and there's a quiet, unspoken economy of food swapping. Half a cookie for half a pickle, a square of chocolate for a corner of jam sandwich. No one keeps score, but everyone remembers the really good trades. Sometimes you let your mind wander. You think about your children. Are they remembering their lunch pails? Did you pack enough for them? Are they behaving for their teachers? Or will you find another note crumpled at the bottom of someone's coat tonight? Sometimes you drift into fantasies of meals with hot soup, fresh bread, maybe even a slice of cake. Other times, you simply marvel at your own ability to sit, chew, and exist at the same time. You notice how quiet it is, despite the presence of so many people. Lunch isn't for talking, it's for recovery, for storing up a little energy to get you through the long afternoon ahead. Sometimes, just for a second, you close your eyes and let the sounds blur together. The scrape of chairs, the distant hum of machines, someone's laugh from across the room. The 10-minute lunch break ends with a sigh and a shuffle. Crumbs brushed away, mugs rinsed. Everyone stands and stretches in the universal language of reluctant resignation. You toss your wax paper, straighten your skirt, and prepare to step back into the noise and rhythm of the workday. Lunch in the 1920s is not a pause, it's a blink. But even in those brief minutes, surrounded by the clatter of the world and the taste of yesterday's bread, you find a small, stubborn peace, a moment to remind yourself, you're still here, still moving, still making it, one hurried bite at a time. By mid-afternoon, your body is 50% caffeine and 50% stubbornness. The clock seems frozen. The fluorescent lights, if you're lucky enough to have them, buzz like judgmental bees. The workday stretches on like a piece of gum stuck to your shoe. The promise of morning energy is long gone, replaced by a bone-deep tiredness that settles somewhere behind your eyes. Your fingers tap slower on the typewriter or slip on the machine parts. Your mind floats between the task at hand and the fantasy of a nap that you know will never come. If you're in an office, the air is heavy and slightly stale, thick with the combined sighs of every woman who's ever tried to calculate the payroll while resisting the urge to rest her head on a stack of invoices. The office clock ticks so loudly, you start to suspect it's doing it on purpose. You glance up at it, hopeful, and realize only 3 minutes have passed since your last hopeful glance. If you're on the factory floor, the afternoon brings a different flavor of exhaustion. The machines seem to get louder as the day gets longer, and each repetitive motion requires a little more concentration. The afternoon sun slants through the factory windows, catching in the dust and turning the air gold, and yet somehow the glow never reaches your workbench. Your feet ache. Your back stages a protest. Your brain is held together by the thinnest string of focus and the distant promise of supper time. Coffee, if it can still be called that, becomes your closest ally. It's thin, lukewarm, and has the flavor profile of burnt hope with notes of cardboard. You drink it anyway, gulping it down with the desperation of someone who knows there's no other option. You consider whether chewing the grounds might be more effective, but decide you need to preserve at least some dignity. Your co-workers aren't faring much better. There's a universal droop to the shoulders, a slackening of pace, the kind of communal fatigue that turns every task into a group survival exercise. Someone proposes singing a song or cracking a joke to break the monotony, but nobody can remember the punchline, and the song devolves into a low hum of agreement that, yes, everyone is tired. Paper cuts start to multiply. Your hands are dry from the endless parade of paperwork, soap, or machine grease. You find yourself daydreaming about a hand cream that isn't just lard mixed with rosewater and hope. A child's face floats through your mind. Did you sign that permission slip? Was it today or last week that the teacher sent home the warning about more reading at home? The fatigue isn't just physical, it's a mental tangle of errands, chores, and constant, low-level math about groceries and rent. Outside, the day slips by. Somewhere, a streetcar rumbles, a dog barks, and life continues on the other side of these walls. The windows tempt you with sunlight, but you're rooted in place by the weight of responsibility and the magnetic pull of just one more task. You start to bargain with the clock. If I can make it to 4, I'll reward myself with a biscuit. At 4:10, you decide the reward is simply surviving until quitting time. The supervisor appears, glancing at everyone with that special combination of skepticism and fatigue management. You make yourself look busy, shoulders squared, eyes alert, at least until he's gone. Then you relax again, only slightly, and wait for that miraculous moment when the end of the workday is close enough to taste. By late afternoon, you're running on instinct, habit, and caffeine fumes. You're tired, but you keep going because you have to, because people are counting on you, because this is just what it takes. In the 1920s, afternoon fatigue isn't a sign of weakness. It's a badge of honor, proof that you're still standing. Even as the clock seems determined to stand still, you pick up your paycheck, small, inconsistent, and already promised to bills. You start calculating rent, groceries, coal, and whether socks can be repaired with hope alone. Payday in the 1920s isn't the jubilant celebration that modern movies pretend it is. There are no confetti cannons, no triumphant music, just a thin paper envelope handed over with the sort of solemnity usually reserved for jury verdicts. You open it, half expecting it to contain a note reading, "Nice try." But instead it's a few crumpled bills and a handful of coins that jingle in a way that feels more mocking than musical. On the walk home, you mentally divide the money into piles, even if you know those piles will never physically exist. The rent pile is the largest and most menacing, looming over the rest with the quiet threat of eviction if it's ever neglected. The grocery pile is nimble, able to stretch, shrink, and perform acrobatics depending on the week's sales and your children's appetites, which expand suspiciously in proportion to how bare the pantry is. The coal pile is crucial and small, especially in winter, and you quickly debate whether you can afford to let the house get a little colder at night if it means you can spring for real butter at the market. There's the laundry pile, the school supplies pile, the unexpected shoe crisis pile, and of course, the maybe this week we treat ourselves to jam pile. Spoiler: the jam pile rarely survives the first round of subtraction. You wonder, not for the first time, what it would be like to have a fun money pile. A pile just for you, for a magazine, or an afternoon matinee, or an ice cream cone you don't have to share. The fantasy is nice. The reality is socks with holes, and the knowledge that you are one chipped tooth away from a financial crisis. At the kitchen table, you take out your ledger, the same one your mother used, its pages filled with tidy columns and anxious math. You add up expenses with the pencil nub that survived 3 rounds of school supply shopping and countless budget emergencies. You run the numbers twice, then a third time, just in case they might magically improve. Spoiler: they do not. Math is stubborn that way. As you balance the checkbook, you find yourself making tiny deals with fate. If the price of potatoes stays low, maybe there's enough for a tin of cocoa. If no one outgrows their shoes this month, you can finally buy soap that smells like something other than lie and desperation. If you get one more week out of that mended skirt, you might even have enough to pay the milkman without apologizing for the late coins. Sometimes, your mind drifts to bigger worries. The hospital bill still lurking in a drawer, the whisper of next month's rent, the way every cough sounds slightly too serious for comfort. You remind yourself that everyone is doing the same delicate dance. Neighbors borrow, shopkeepers let the tab slide, and sometimes a bill is just a friendly reminder delivered with a sigh and a wink. And yet, there is a strange sort of pride in it all. You've become a financial acrobat, a mathematician of survival. You make things work with less, stretching every dollar and every ounce of optimism a little further than seems possible. You know exactly how to cut a bar of soap in half, how to make soup from almost nothing, how to make old boots last an extra month with cardboard and faith. As evening falls, you tuck the few remaining coins into a tea tin high on the pantry shelf, a small, secret insurance policy against the next surprise. You sigh, close the ledger, and smile at your children, who are already dreaming of jam and new shoes and all the things you're determined to someday provide. Payday is rarely enough, but somehow you make it work. In the 1920s, the math is never in your favor, but the hope always is. And that, miraculously, gets you through. At the market, you compare prices, weigh apples with the seriousness of a judge, and debate whether meat is worth the emotional and financial commitment this week. The grocery list, such as it is, lives mostly in your head. A running inventory of what you have, what you need, and what you can absolutely live without until payday. With your purse clutched tight, you step into the crowded market. The smells of fresh bread, coffee, and the occasional less charming whiff of fish filling the air. Vendors call out their prices like auctioneers, advertising oranges straight off the boat, potatoes fresh as the day is long, and eggs that, if they're being honest, have probably seen more sunrises than you have this week. You start at the produce stall, where bruised apples sit in neat rows and cabbages seem to multiply by the hour. Each purchase is a negotiation, not just with the vendor, but with yourself. Is this onion worth 3 cents? Can you stretch these carrots into 2 meals? You gently prod a tomato, weighing it with the care of someone evaluating diamonds. One child wants oranges, another requests bananas, but you both know that the fruit budget is limited to whatever is on the verge of being overripe. The vendor offers a smile and, if he's in a good mood, a slightly better price on the last 2 apples before they turn to cider. Moving on to the butcher, you brace yourself. Meat is an event, not a staple. You examine a roast, mentally calculating how many ways you could stretch it. Stew, hash, sandwiches if you're lucky, but the cost stings. And you imagine the week's meals again. How many different ways can a person serve beans before there's a revolt at the dinner table? You settle on a few slices of bacon, or maybe a soup bone if the budget is tight. The butcher wraps it with a flourish, as if he's handing you gold. Next, you eye the bread stall, the loaves lined up in uneven ranks. Bread is cheaper than nearly anything else, and you debate getting 2. One for now, one for later. Although later usually means tomorrow morning when the kids are inexplicably starving again. You ask for a fresh loaf, but the baker offers you yesterday's at a discount. You accept, because in the economy of single motherhood, yesterday's bread is tomorrow's toast. And maybe croutons for a soup if you're feeling fancy. Cheese and milk are last on your list, precious luxuries guarded like state secrets. You hand over the coins, watching as the milkman pours your ration into a glass bottle, sealing it with a bit of paper and string. Cheese is sliced thinner than your patience by Friday. If you're feeling brave, you might ask about eggs, but only if the week's been particularly brave, kind. Even so, you know how to make every egg count, stretched into pancakes, baked into custards, or simply boiled for lunches. Throughout the market, you trade pleasantries with other women, each of you an expert in the subtle language of survival. You share tips on sales, rumors about which stalls are fair, and the occasional commiseration over the price of butter. Sometimes a neighbor will quietly slip you a spare potato or a handful of beans. Sometimes you do the same. You carry your treasures home in a cloth bag, mentally turning the contents into meals, soups, stews, bread and jam, maybe a treat if the numbers worked out. Every item is accounted for, and you've once again managed to turn a handful of coins into a week's worth of hope. Grocery shopping in the 1920s isn't just a chore, it's a daily battle, a quiet triumph, and a testament to the art of making do. The pennies may be few, but your resolve is endless. And, for tonight at least, there's food on the table and a plan for tomorrow. You walk back into your home greeted by children, noise, and a suspicious smell coming from somewhere that may or may not be the laundry pile. The front door swings open, and you're immediately enveloped by the chaos you call family life. There's a blur of movement, small bodies racing through rooms, shoes skidding across linoleum, the thud of something heavy hitting the floor upstairs. At least two children are mid-argument about a pencil, while another one is already asking when dinner will be ready, as if you were holding out on a feast and not just stalling for time while you take off your shoes. You set your grocery bag down and are almost knocked over by a pair of sticky hands that are, at this very moment, either hugging you or trying to steal a piece of bread, possibly both. Someone has spilled something, but you decide it's probably just water and not worth investigating until you've had a chance to sit. Your coat is tugged off before you're fully through the doorway, your pockets emptied by curious fingers searching for surprise treats or forgotten coins. The suspicious smell intensifies as you move toward the kitchen. It could be the laundry, still damp from this morning's failed attempt at drying it near the stove, or it could be last night's cabbage making a repeat appearance from the trash bin. Either way, you resolve to open a window, eventually. Right now, the priority is dinner. Your children orbit around you in varying states of hunger and mischief. One insists he's starving and will waste away before supper, while the other insists she's definitely not hungry for stew. The third is simply sticky, with no further explanation offered or required. You take a deep breath, mentally sifting through the day's market haul, and start the nightly performance known as making dinner out of nothing. While you're peeling potatoes or slicing yesterday's bread, the circus continues. Someone starts to practice piano with the grace of a tone-deaf elephant. Someone else finds a whistle, how, you'll never know, and begins serenading the house with the world's shrillest rendition of Yankee Doodle. In the hallway, socks are being weaponized, and the youngest child is now wearing a pot on his head, declaring himself king of the kitchen. You field questions at the rate of a professional auctioneer. Where's my blue ribbon? Why do pickles taste funny? Can we have dessert before dinner? What's for dinner? And of course, the classic, where do babies come from? You sidestep the last one, promising an answer after you've finished the gravy, hoping they'll forget. Spoiler, they never forget. The cat, if you have one, is yowling for scraps. If you don't have a cat, the neighbors has somehow moved in and adopted you. There are knocks at the door, someone's friend looking for homework help, or Mrs. Fink from down the street, delivering the news that there's a hole in your fence, as though you weren't already aware. Somehow, amid the whirlwind, you manage to get a meal on the table. It's not fancy, but it's warm, filling, and accompanied by at least 3 simultaneous conversations. Plates clatter, spoons scrape, and the sound of laughter, occasionally interrupted by minor squabbles, fills the house. The suspicious smell recedes, at least until you remember the laundry again. As dinner winds down, you look around at the beautiful, imperfect mess that is your home. The evening circus isn't glamorous, and it certainly isn't quiet, but it's yours. A daily reminder that in the middle of the noise and nonsense, there's family, there's love, and, despite the odds, there's enough. Even if the laundry pile smells suspiciously like the inside of a hockey bag, you sit your kid down with pencils and paper. They stare at the homework like it's ancient hieroglyphics. You become a tutor, mediator, and amateur mathematician simultaneously. It's evening in your 1920s living room, the golden hour light slanting through smudged glass and illuminating the family table, a battlefield of arithmetic and spelling lists. The children, who moments before were sprinting laps around the kitchen, are now slumped in chairs, pencils in hand, doing their best impressions of statues. One child squints at a column of numbers, another picks at a scab, and the youngest pokes the eraser into their ear just to see what happens. You take a seat and prepare for the nightly academic gauntlet. "What's 6 times 7?" you ask, voice full of patient optimism. The oldest stares off into space, searching for the answer among the ceiling cracks. The youngest suggests 4. You gently redirect, wondering for the 1,000th time if anyone at the school board has ever actually tried to teach tired children after a full day of living. Tonight's math homework is a logic puzzle, except the logic is sometimes harder for you than it is for the kids. Word problems involve scenarios about trains leaving different cities, chickens laying improbable numbers of eggs, and the occasional reference to borrowing and carrying numbers that sound suspiciously like economic advice you could use. Fractions are a group effort. You explain, they nod, you explain again, they sigh, and together you all try to remember if improper means something bad or just something you wish you could say out loud. You move to spelling and penmanship, the latter being a special kind of torment in a house where every pencil has been chewed to half its original size. Use it in a sentence, you prompt, only to receive stories about cats, superheroes, and why broccoli is the villain in every meal. You correct the letter Q for the 6th time, ignoring the urge to simply let it become a new letter entirely. The children argue, loudly, over who gets to use the good eraser, the one that erases rather than smudges. Tears are threatened, negotiations ensue, and you're suddenly a full-time peacekeeper. Someone storms away from the table, only to return moments later because they can't remember what capitalization means. You try not to take it personally. In between refereeing, you're still deciphering teachers' notes. Sometimes they're encouragements. Keep practicing long division. Sometimes they're gentle reminders. Please return library book. Sometimes they're cryptic warnings about an upcoming special project, which you suspect is code for parental involvement required. You add it to the mental list of things to worry about right after rent and right before. Will we ever see the bottom of the laundry basket? As the homework hour ticks by, the house grows louder, then quieter, then, miraculously, focused. You answer questions about geography, science, and the historical significance of the steam engine. Topics you haven't reviewed since your own school days, and even then, only for as long as the teacher stood over your punnet shoulder. You offer encouragements. You're doing great. And the occasional bribe. Finish this page, and maybe there's jam for dessert. The pencils keep moving. Finally, after much effort and not a little sweat, the last math problem is solved. The last word is spelled, and the last pencil rolled under the table. Homework is complete, more or less. You stack the papers, check for stray answers scribbled in the margins, and breathe out a sigh that's equal parts relief and exhaustion. In the quiet aftermath, you realize this nightly ritual is its own kind of lesson, not just for the children, but for you. It's a study in patience, perseverance, and the fine art of explaining fractions while simultaneously removing a marble from someone's nose. Homework in the 1920s isn't just about arithmetic. It's about holding the family together, one barely sharpened pencil at a time. Laundry means boiling water, hand-scrubbing shirts until your knuckles ache, and wringing everything out with the strength of a competitive athlete. It's you versus stains, and stains often win. You wake up on laundry day already tired, knowing what's ahead. a full-blown aquatic event starring tubs, washboards, and clouds of steam. Forget the sweet-smelling, automated magic of modern washing machines. In the 1920s, laundry is a manual labor sport, part science experiment, part test of personal willpower. The first challenge is water. You fill a kettle and 2 saucepans from the tap, knowing it will take most of the morning just to heat enough for the first round. Once it's boiling, you pour it carefully into the washtub, trying not to splash and scald yourself, which is nearly impossible when you're pouring a gallon of lava into a metal pail. The kitchen turns tropical, steam coating the windows, curling your hair, and making everyone feel like they're living in a communal teapot. Soap comes next. Not gentle, lavender-scented bars, but big, harsh blocks of laundry soap. The kind that's a little intimidating to handle and even more terrifying to accidentally get in your eyes. You shave off slices with a knife, drop them into the steaming water, and stir until your fingers feel raw, just from holding paddle. Now the real work begins. Scrubbing each shirt, each pair of socks, each mysteriously stained undershirt gets a full interrogation. You attack armpits, knees, and collars with a brush and elbow grease, working the soap in like you're trying to erase the evidence of childhood. And it turns out, childhood is mostly made of grass, stains, ink, and whatever mysterious substance your youngest decided to experiment with at lunch. There's no soundtrack except for the slosh of water, the scrape of fabric against the board, and your own quiet muttering. You glance at the growing pile of still dirty clothes and wonder if the children are actually rolling in mud at recess, or if the house itself is just manufacturing grime for job security. Rinsing requires a second tub, this one just as heavy, just as hot, and just as unwieldy. You dunk each piece, swishing it around with the ferocity of a shark. Then wring it out until your hands scream in protest. By the end of an hour, your knuckles are red, your arms ache, and you've discovered new muscle groups you never knew existed. Competitive athletes might run marathons, but have they ever wrung out 6 woolen sweaters by hand? You think not. The final step is hanging everything to dry. On a good day, the sun is shining and there's a breeze. On a bad day, it's raining, and you have to string lines across the kitchen, creating a low-hanging labyrinth of damp shirts and socks for everyone to dodge. Nothing says home quite like having to duck under your father's long johns to reach the pantry. If you're lucky, your laundry smells like soap and sunshine by dinner time. If you're not, it still smells like wet wool and effort. Just when you think you're finished, someone, always someone, arrives with a shirt they forgot to add to the pile. You resist the urge to weep, take a deep breath, and start again. Laundry day in the 1920s is not glamorous. It's physical labor, steam, soap, and suffering. It's a battle against stains and time, fought with nothing but your own 2 hands and an endless supply of patience. And as you collapse into a chair at the end of the day, arms rubbery, surrounded by drying clothes and the faint, proud scent of hard-won cleanliness, you know you've survived another round. The stains may win sometimes, but so do you. You sweep floors, wipe surfaces, and question how children can create so much disorder in such little time. Dust returns faster than motivation. Every corner of the house seems to exist in a state of perpetual disarray, as if the universe is determined to test your patience and the physical limits of brooms. In the 1920s, there's no vacuum to roar to your rescue, just a humble bristle brush, a bucket, and your own resolve. The day's great mystery isn't where lost socks go, but how so many crumbs have assembled beneath the table before breakfast has even ended. You start with the floors. which are less a surface and more a community gathering place for dirt, coal, soot, and enough hair to knit a new child. You sweep and instantly feel the sting of betrayal as a breeze brings it all back in again, sneaking under doors and through the tiniest cracks in the window. There's a science to sweeping, a series of practiced flicks and careful pile management. But no matter how careful you are, there's always one last dust bunny hiding under the stove, waiting for the perfect moment to dart out and ruin your sense of accomplishment. Once the floors are somewhat conquered, you turn to the tabletops. They bear the scars of childhood, scratches, sticky spots, and ink stains in odd places. You wipe them down with a rag dipped in soapy water, the scent of lye rising like a warning. You scrub away the jelly from breakfast, a mysterious splatter from lunch, and the always surprising thumbprint of jam that has made its way to the underside of the bread box. The children, oblivious to your heroic efforts, are experts at redecorating. You pick up building blocks, pencils, storybooks, and the occasional sock that has somehow found its way onto the curtain rod. Toys have a way of multiplying overnight, taking up positions on every step, under every chair, and inside every possible shoe. You try to instill a sense of order, urging your small army to put things away. But the concept of away is, apparently, subjective. Dusting is next. If sweeping is Sisyphean, dusting is downright philosophical. You dust the mantle and in seconds, a fine film settles again, as if the house is actively resisting your efforts to maintain dignity. The radio, your proudest possession, gets special attention, polished until it gleams, even if the children immediately plant sticky fingers all over the dial, in an attempt to find something fun on the airwaves. You pause now and then, hands on hips, surveying the scene. You realize the battle is endless, the enemy eternal. There are always fingerprints on windows, shoe prints in the hallway, and a faint, lingering aroma of last night's stew clinging to the curtains. Some days, the task feels impossible, but there are small victories. A clean counter, an organized pile of laundry, a room that, for 5 glorious minutes, looks almost peaceful. Of course, no sooner do you sit down for a breath than someone bursts in with muddy shoes, trailing crumbs and chaos behind them. A glass of milk is spilled, a box of buttons dumped out for science, and the dog decides it's the perfect time to shake off a day's worth of adventure in the middle of your freshly swept floor. But in all the madness, you find your rhythm. The house is never perfect, but it's alive, a living thing shaped by noise, laughter, a little bit of dust, and a whole lot of effort. Tidying isn't about reaching some gleaming standard of cleanliness, but about creating a place where your family can eat, play, rest, and, despite all odds, come home to comfort. So you sweep, you wipe, you tidy. Dust always comes back, but so does love, laughter, and the stubborn daily hope that tomorrow, just maybe, the mess will be a little less. It won't. But the hope, at least, is clean. You shovel coal into a stove that huffs dramatically like it resents being alive. The house warms slightly, then immediately loses the heat through every drafty corner. Keeping a 1920s home warm isn't just a matter of turning a dial or tapping your phone. It's a daily performance, part science, part prayer, and all physical labor. Coal is precious. Each lump a small black gem that you ration with the expertise of a financier and the hesitation of someone who knows that next week's supply is never guaranteed. You open the scuttle, dump in a fresh scoop, and wait for the stove to decide whether today is the day it will cooperate, or if it plans to wage a passive-aggressive war against comfort. The stove rattles and shivers, metal plates expanding with an alarming ping, as if announcing its displeasure to the entire house. You open the damper, prod the embers, and stand back while a tiny, reluctant flame flickers to life. Sometimes the smoke goes up the chimney. Sometimes it decides to visit the kitchen, drifting through the house with the subtlety of a parade. You fan it away with a dish towel, coughing theatrically, and make a mental note to mention drafts to the landlord again, knowing he'll blame it on modern ventilation. Every door and window in the house is a potential leak. Drafts sneak in like mischievous spirits, swirling around your ankles, slithering beneath the doors, making curtains flutter and giving every room that unique outdoor-indoor ambience. You stuff old towels into the cracks, tape newspaper to the window frames, and consider, for the 100th time, inventing a house made entirely out of quilts. Your children wrap themselves in sweaters, scarves, and sometimes even spare curtains. Anything to preserve what little warmth the stove begrudgingly provides. There's a constant negotiation of comfort. Stand too close to the stove and risk singeing your shins. Stray too far and your toes freeze into tiny ice sculptures. Everyone huddles in the warmest room, the kitchen, most likely, leaving the rest of the house to drift into Arctic territory. The bedrooms are a test of endurance. And bedtime means piling on layers. Long underwear, socks, sweaters, a woolen blanket so heavy it doubles as resistance training, and, if you're lucky, a hot water bottle or a brick wrapped in flannel for good measure. Coal dust settles on everything, a fine black confetti that no amount of dusting seems to prevent. You find smudges on faces, fingerprints, walls, and a faint, permanent scent that blends with the musty sweetness of old furniture and cooked cabbage. Your hands turn grey, your apron gains new patterns, and you find yourself wondering if anyone in history has ever felt truly, lastingly warm. You keep a constant eye on the coal pile, calculating how many more cold nights it might last. Each trip to the cellar or shed is an adventure, navigating dim steps with a heavy bucket, praying you won't stub a toe or startle whatever small creatures have moved in for the winter. On especially lean weeks, you burn newspaper, wood scraps, even dried orange peels, making each flame a tiny triumph of ingenuity over adversity. Still, on good nights, you gather the family around the stove, sharing stories while the warmth, such as it is, radiates through the room. The glow is dim but comforting, the shadows on the walls long and dramatic. You sip hot tea, listen to the coal crackle, and feel, for a moment, the quiet satisfaction of having coaxed a little comfort out of a stubborn old stove and a pile of dusty black rocks. Keeping warm in the 1920s is not about luxury. It's a test of resourcefulness, patience, and optimism. A belief that spring will come, the coal will last, and, until then, blankets and laughter can fill in the cracks. You start the bedtime routine. The children suddenly need water, stories, hugs, answers to existential questions, and 3 additional blankets each. It begins innocently enough. A simple declaration that it's bedtime. But in the 1920s, as now, this phrase acts less as a command and more as a starting gun for one of the most intricate negotiations known to humankind. The kids, previously limp with fatigue, are suddenly wide awake, alert, talkative, and ready to make their case before the court of stalling bedtime. First, there are the logistical requirements. Everyone needs to use the bathroom, some more than once, and always in a particular order that nobody can remember. There's the hunt for the elusive favorite pajama top, possibly buried under the day's laundry or worn by a sibling. Socks must be located, removed, then inexplicably put back on for warmth. Each child produces a small mountain of requests: a glass of water, never cold, never warm, just right; an extra trip to the window to make sure it's still night; and the immediate need for a snack because they are, apparently, starving. You field questions at the rate of a seasoned politician. Why is the sky dark? How do dreams work? Will I still be here tomorrow if I sleep with my socks on? For every answer, a new question blooms. Your replies grow more philosophical as the night wears on. At some point, you catch yourself saying, "Because that's how the moon works," and just hope that's enough for now. Then there are bedtime stories. The selection process is lengthy. One child wants the one about the bear. Another insists on a fairy tale you barely remember, and a third requests something exciting but not scary. You read, improvising when memory fails, editing as you go to make sure no one is frightened into wakefulness. You do voices, add dramatic pauses, and make a mental note never to read a book with too many animal characters again. After the story comes the chorus of "One more, please," which you counter with the classic, "It's late, tomorrow we'll read too." This is a lie, but it's a gentle one, born of survival. Goodnight kisses are distributed, sometimes twice, and every child insists on a different configuration of blankets, sheets, and pillows. There is always, without fail, a minor dispute about who has the warmest blanket or whose feet are too cold for this planet. Lights are turned down, lullabies are hummed, and for a brief, shining moment, it seems like everyone is settling. Then someone remembers a crucial bit of unfinished business. What about my tooth under the pillow? Did you sign my homework? Can you check under the bed for monsters? You dutifully perform monster inspections, collect tiny teeth, and give last-minute reassurances that homework is, indeed, in the school bag and not lost in the void. At last, you retreat to the doorway, performing the delicate dance of exiting without making a sound. You get halfway down the hall before you hear the familiar, whispered chorus, "Mama?" Someone forgot to say goodnight to the cat, needs a nightlight adjustment, or has remembered a pressing detail about tomorrow's show and tell. You sigh. Return for another round of tucking, pat a few heads, and try not to think about the stack of dishes waiting for you in the kitchen. Bedtime, you realize, isn't about sleeping. It's about reassurance, ritual, and loving patience, served in small, often repeated doses. And finally, blessedly, the house grows quiet. The negotiation marathon is over for tonight. You close their door, tiptoe away, and savor the fleeting peace, knowing you'll do it all again tomorrow, with the same mix of endurance, humor, and more blankets than any reasonable person should ever need. Once the kids are asleep, you finally eat whatever is left, which may be half a potato and emotional exhaustion. The house has grown quiet, a silence so rare you almost hesitate to disturb it, but your stomach insists otherwise. You tiptoe into the kitchen, lights low and floor chilly beneath your tired feet. The dining table bears the remnants of the evening's culinary battle. A gravy boat with a stubborn crust, 2 plates licked almost clean, 1 fork under a chair, and the faint, lingering scent of overcooked cabbage and ambition. You survey the leftovers with the expertise of a museum curator assessing rare artifacts. There's a spoonful of stew congealing in a bowl, a heel of bread no one wanted, and the solitary potato, looking as if it has just finished a hard day's work itself. Still, you're too hungry to be picky. You gather up your findings, scraping the pan for the last, caramelized bits and arranging everything on the cleanest saucer you can find. Your dinner is part scavenger hunt, part lesson in creative optimism. You sit down at the kitchen table, the same table that only an hour ago hosted a full circus of elbows, spilled milk, and arguments about homework. Now, it's yours alone, a small island of peace lit by the glow of the stove and the hush of sleeping children. You eat slowly, methodically, as if savoring the silence as much as the food. Every bite is accompanied by the knowledge that you're not just feeding yourself, you're refueling for tomorrow, for another round of breakfast negotiations and laundry diplomacy. Tonight's meal may be modest, but you find small pleasures in it. The bread, when dunked in stew, is still warm. The potato, dressed with a pinch of salt, tastes like something earned. You allow yourself a moment to sit back, close your eyes, and just breathe. For a brief minute, you're not a provider or a referee. You're simply a person, alone with her thoughts and a chipped teacup. The kitchen is quieter at this hour, but there are still small sounds. The tick of the wall clock, the distant rumble of a streetcar, the faint rustle of laundry shifting in its basket. You remember when dinner meant more variety, maybe a roast, or a fresh pie, or at least a slab of cheese that wasn't rationed into invisibility. But those are luxuries for better weeks. Tonight, dinner is practical, unglamorous, and eaten not out of desire, but necessity. You think about tomorrow's menu, doing the math in your head as you chew. If you save the rest of the carrots for stew, maybe there's enough flour for biscuits, and if you're careful, a bit of jam might survive until the weekend. Planning meals is a never-ending puzzle, pieces shifting with each day's paycheck and every child's whim. There's a certain freedom in eating alone. No need to bargain, coax, or cut anyone else's food. You don't have to answer questions or moderate debates over whose turn it is to clear the table. It's just you, a quiet room, and a plate that may be humble, but is yours. As you finish the last bite, you resist the urge to feel sorry for yourself. After all, you've kept everyone fed, warm, and loved for another day. That is a victory, even if tonight's feast is little more than crumbs. You set your plate in the sink, rinse it quietly, and glance at the reflection in the kitchen window. Tired, yes, but also quietly triumphant. This meal, the forgotten meal, is a silent celebration, a recognition that sometimes simply making it through the day is reason enough to sit, eat, and call it good. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. For now, you let yourself savor the peace, the small fullness, and the knowledge that you did enough. You wash dishes, mend clothes, and mentally prepare for tomorrow's chaos. The silence is nice until something in the kitchen mysteriously falls over. The children are finally asleep, their soft breathing muffled behind closed doors, and the house settles into an exhausted hush. You stand at the sink, sleeves rolled up, hands in warm, soapy water, cleaning the remains of dinner with the deliberate patience of someone who knows this is only the first round. Each dish is a small victory. Every pot that scrubs clean is one less thing to worry about come morning. Washing dishes at night is strangely meditative. The water soothes your tired hands, and the repetitive motion gives your mind a chance to drift, sometimes to what needs doing tomorrow, sometimes to nothing at all. Occasionally, you find yourself humming an old tune, the sound swallowed by the kitchen's stillness. The evening's next opponent, laundry. If you're lucky, today's wash has had time to dry by the fire, but more likely you'll find shirts still damp and socks stubbornly refusing to surrender their chill. You hang them anyway, creating an obstacle course between the stove and the pantry. Mending comes next. You sit by the lamp, darning holes in knees and elbows, your needle flashing in the soft light. Each patch and stitch is a quiet act of care, proof that you're stretching every penny and every ounce of effort as far as they will go. In between chores, you put away shoes, stack tomorrow's school books, and search for wayward items that never seem to stay put. Gloves, pencils, marbles, the occasional sandwich crust tucked where it absolutely does not belong. The kitchen floor creaks, a reminder that even houses get tired, and every so often something tips over for no good reason, breaking the silence with a crash that sends your heart racing. You check, sigh, and decide it can probably wait until morning. As you work, you build a mental checklist for the next day. Who needs a note for school? What's left in the pantry? Is there enough coal to get through another chilly morning? Each item is catalogued, filed away, and occasionally swapped out for small worries about the kids, bills, or the ever-present question of whether you're doing enough. The quiet is soothing, but it's also when your thoughts catch up with you. You think about your family, how much the children have grown, what new words they learned, how the youngest's laugh makes even the hardest days feel lighter. You wonder what the future will bring, how long the seams will hold on your best dress, if you'll ever get through a week without patching something. But for now, there are chores, and the sense of small control they provide. Every clean dish stacked, every sock mended, every toy put in its place is a reassurance. Evidence that, even in the middle of exhaustion, you are shaping a world that's safe, warm, and just a little more orderly than it was an hour before. You finally hang up your apron, stretch your back, and look around the kitchen. It isn't perfect. There are still crumbs in the corners and fingerprints on the windows, but the worst of the chaos has been beaten back for one more night. You let the quiet settle, feel the satisfaction of survival, and maybe pour yourself the last cup of tea. Lukewarm, yes, but a reward all the same. Evening chores are a second work shift, unpaid and unseen by anyone but you, but in their own way, they are a nightly victory. A reminder that, no matter how long the list or how tired your bones, you've managed, once again, to hold the world together until morning. Neighbors talk. Society judges. Every choice you make feels like it's being reviewed by an invisible panel of critics who have never met your children but have plenty to say. In the 1920s, a single mother walks through the world with an extra layer of scrutiny tucked beneath her dress. The moment you step outside, kids in tow, hair done as best you can, coat patched at the elbows, you feel eyes on you. Mrs. Hargrove from across the street glances up from her knitting, her eyebrows arching in silent commentary on whether your youngest's socks match. Mr. Jones, who can't keep his own garden alive, somehow always finds time to note that your front step needs sweeping. It's not just neighbors, either. Shopkeepers, school teachers, even strangers on the trolley, all have opinions about the state of your family. The subtle questions start the moment you open your mouth. Is it just you, dear? Are you managing all right? When will you remarry? As if a husband is an umbrella you've simply misplaced and will surely locate if you just check the hall closet again. Sometimes the judgments come in whispers, soft, scandalized voices just out of earshot. Other times, they arrive dressed up as advice, tucked into casual conversation like a pinch of salt in stew. Children really do better with a father figure, you know. Have you thought about taking in boarders? My cousin's friend did, and now she's practically a land baron. Or, the favorite, it must be so hard for you. I just couldn't do it. You nod and smile, tucking their words away with the bills you can't quite pay and the socks you'll darn after dinner. You find yourself rehearsing explanations you never wanted to give. Why your husband isn't there, why you don't go to church every Sunday, why you work so many hours, why the children's shoes are scuffed, why dinner smells like it was made by someone rationing both time and salt. Each reason is simple, but telling it never is. Even in moments meant for rest, the pressure lingers. You tuck your children into bed, recalling how, earlier that afternoon, Mrs. Perkins watched your daughter climb a tree in her good dress. And you brace yourself for a knock on the door with a neighborly tip about respectable girls. You watch your sons tumble in from the yard, cheeks smudged, and steel yourself for the possibility that someone will comment on how boys need a firm hand. Sometimes the scrutiny stings. You question yourself. Are you really doing enough? Is that second hand coat too shabby? Is your child's lunch pail too empty? The world's expectations are heavy and often contradictory, the opinions ever-changing and impossible to satisfy. But most days, you shake it off, because you know what the world doesn't. How hard you work, how much you love, how fiercely you protect your children's joy. Yet, there are small kindnesses that balance the scales. A neighbor quietly leaves a loaf of bread or a clutch of eggs on your porch. The woman at the bakery slips your child an extra roll and pretends not to notice when you count your coins twice. Another mother gives you a knowing smile at the market, an unspoken nod that says, "I see you. I get it." These moments of understanding, though rare, are more nourishing than any compliment about clean windows or well-pressed collars. Still, every day is a performance. Your choices weighed and measured by invisible juries. You learn to square your shoulders, lift your chin, and meet each glance with your own kind of courage. You may not silence the whispers or change the minds of those who judge, but you become an expert at surviving them, at living, thriving, and loving loudly enough to drown them out. Because, at the end of the day, opinions are plentiful, but so is your resolve, and in a world full of critics, you are your own quiet champion, strong, stubborn, and determined to write your family's story, no matter who's watching. The mail brings overdue notices, advertisements, and letters from distant relatives offering unsolicited advice. You sigh deeply and file everything into the later pile. It's a daily ritual, the shuffle of footsteps down the walkway, the clank of the mail slot, and the small, fluttering dread as envelopes hit the floor. In the 1920s, mail is a lifeline and a threat, sometimes bringing good news, but more often a parade of bills, formal warnings, and distant relations writing just to let you know they worry about you. You pick up the small pile, sorting with the skill of a poker player, trying to hide a bad hand. The first envelope is a bill, printed in stern black ink, the kind that seems to judge you before you even open it. The electric company, reminding you, again, how much light you've dared to enjoy this month. The rent is due. The coal man would like a word. The water bill is in red, which you've learnt is never a good sign, even if it does add a festive touch to your to-pay stack. Next come the advertisements. One for a new brand of soap, guaranteed to make laundry a pleasure, which earns an eye roll so hard you nearly sprain something. Another is for a miracle tonic, promising to cure all your ills, provided your only ills are hope and gullibility. A local department store offers a sale on men's hats, which feels less like a shopping opportunity and more like a reminder. Tucked between the bills and the flyers is a letter from your Aunt Lillian, written in her spidery script and filled with news of people you barely remember. She includes advice, of course, always advice. "You mustn't work so hard, dear," she writes, as though you hadn't considered that option. She adds a recipe for liver casserole, which you file under emergencies only. There's a cousin's wedding announcement, a reminder that everyone else's life seems to unfold in neat, predictable chapters, unlike your own, which feels more like a choose-your-own-adventure with missing pages. You glance over each piece, weighing urgency against your own patience. Some bills are due now, some can wait. You pencil notes in the margins. Next week, maybe, and add them to the growing later pile, which you will revisit, reorganize, and ignore several more times before anything is actually paid. Letters from friends or family, real friends, the ones who know you, are a rare bright spot. You savor their stories, the jokes and little updates tucked between the lines. You respond in kind, squeezing updates onto thin sheets of paper, mindful of every word and every penny for postage. Correspondence isn't just about staying in touch. It's a small, stubborn way of saying, I'm still here. I'm making it. Occasionally there is bad news. A cousin fallen ill. A neighbor's misfortune. A job lost across town. The hard edges of other people's lives mingle with your own. A reminder that no one is immune to worry or heartbreak. You let yourself sigh. A long, deep exhale, and add those letters to the later pile too, hoping that time will soften their sharpness. You tuck the day's mail into its drawer, close it firmly, and give yourself permission not to think about it, at least for a little while. The bills will wait. The advice will wait. The world, for once, can wait. You step away from the desk and turn your mind back to the present. The warmth of the stove, the sound of your children laughing, the familiar comfort of things you can control. If only for tonight. Mail in the 1920s is a mixed blessing. News, burdens, and the occasional reminder that, even as the world keeps sending its demands and opinions, you're still writing your own story. One letter, one bill, and one day at a time. You sit in your favorite chair with a cup of tea, so weak it's practically water. For a moment, 3 minutes at most. You breathe. The house is finally still. Children's feet are quiet. Pots have ceased clattering. The stove simmers without protest. You sink into the chair that has molded itself to your shape over the years. A lumpy, lopsided throne patched with memories and the odd bit of yarn. It creaks just enough to remind you it's real, but not so much as to summon anyone asking for a story or a glass of milk. You cradle your teacup in both hands, letting the rising warmth soothe your battered knuckles. The tea is less Earl Grey and more hot hope, a result of rationed leaves, and a kettle that boiled a little too long. Still, you sip, savouring the illusion of flavour and the comfort of ritual. In these precious minutes, your body releases its grip on the day's worries, and you let your mind drift to quieter places. Maybe you stare at the fading wallpaper, tracing its floral pattern with tired eyes, remembering when it was new and you had one less worry about the price of coal. Maybe you close your eyes entirely, listening for nothing, just the slow tick of the clock and the distant, reassuring hush of city life winding down. Outside, a trolley clangs its bell, a neighbour closes a window, and the night presses gently against the glass, promising a temporary ceasefire from all things urgent. Your thoughts float to a safer, softer landscape. You remember a summer picnic by the river, the sound of laughter, the taste of strawberries plucked straight from the vine. No rationing, no bills, no chores waiting around the next bend. For a moment, you imagine yourself somewhere else. A grand hotel with servants, a garden filled with roses, a world where me time lasts longer than a boiling kettle. But reality is never far. A floorboard pops somewhere in the hallway. The cat, or a neighbour's opportunistic feline, pads across the rug, eyeing your teacup with gentle disdain. The sensation of calm is fragile and fleeting, but you hold on to it with both hands, determined to squeeze every last drop from this rare gift. You take stock, not of bills or errands, but of yourself, the small aches in your back, the roughness of your palms, the faint but persistent pride that comes from making it through another day. In these 3 minutes, you forgive yourself the things left undone, the dust on the mantel, the half-mended shirt, the unwashed pan. The world is still spinning, but you are allowed to rest. The silence is not perfect. There are distant city sounds, the soft crackle of the stove settling down for the night, the nearly inaudible snore of a child behind a closed door. But here, they do not demand anything of you. Here, you are just yourself, not Mama or Miss or the woman who never has a moment to sit down. Here, for just 3 minutes, you exist without responsibility. You savor every second, every tiny pleasure, the steam curling from your cup, the feeling of your tired legs propped on a stool, the gentle thud of your own heartbeat slowing down. You look out the window and see the world softened by twilight. Less sharp, less insistent, more forgiving. And then, just as you begin to imagine what life would be like if these moments were longer, a crash from the pantry or the familiar cry of Mama pulls you back to duty. You set your cup down, rise from your chair, and step back into your life. But those 3 minutes, they matter. They fill you up in ways that a full meal or a soft bed never quite can. They remind you that you are more than what you accomplish, that even in a world that asks everything of you, you are allowed, every once in a while, to simply be. You collapse into bed, grateful for the softness, even though the springs poke you. Tomorrow is coming, fast and loud. But for now, you sink into the dark with weary relief. The house, at last, is quiet. The stove has been banked, the last cup has been washed, and every child is tucked beneath a mountain of blankets. You've made your nightly rounds, checking doors, whispering final reassurances, double-knotting the curtain against drafts. The world beyond your walls is still stirring. Cats yowl, a trolley clangs down the avenue. Someone's radio plays a faint waltz. But here, in your room, there is only the hush of sleep waiting to claim you. You pull the covers up and stretch your legs, toes finding the coldest corner of the mattress, a ritual as ancient as beds themselves. The pillow is flat, but it's your pillow. The quilt is patched, but it's warm. You are surrounded by the gentle, familiar scent of soap, clean sheets, and just a trace of coal smoke. It's not luxury, but it's comfort, worn and honest and hard-won. Your body sinks gratefully into the mattress, which creaks in protest, as if reminding you of its age and the number of generations it's seen through sleepless nights and early mornings. There are springs that groan, one that pokes insistently at your hip. But after a day spent on your feet, even this lumpy bed feels like a reward. You find the sweet spot, twist the blanket around your shoulders, and close your eyes, feeling the tension leave your jaw, your hands, your tired legs. In the darkness, your mind begins its nightly review. You replay the events of the day, not in order, not with clarity, but in a sleepy jumble of images: socks drying by the stove, children's laughter, the clatter of dishes, the ticking of the clock as you patched a pair of elbows by lamplight. There are worries too, bills to pay, boots to mend, questions that don't have answers. But here, under the weight of blankets and exhaustion, those worries grow softer, less insistent, as if even they know it's time for a truce. Sleep creeps in, slow and gentle, a tide rising against the shore of wakefulness. For a moment, you are neither planning nor remembering. You simply drift, buoyed by the knowledge that, for tonight, you've done enough. You've carried the world through another day, and tomorrow can wait its turn. Outside, the city dreams. Streetlights flicker, somewhere a dog barks, and the moon slips between clouds, keeping its lonely vigil over rooftops and alleyways. You imagine the lives of neighbors, other mothers, other children, all folded into beds of their own, all making their quiet peace with the day behind and the one ahead. You let your mind wander to gentler places. Maybe you recall a summer field, the hum of bees, the feeling of cool grass under bare feet. Maybe you float toward hopes for tomorrow, a day with fewer spills, fewer tears, more laughter. Or maybe you think of nothing at all, letting the darkness sweep you clean. The springs squeak once more as you shift, chasing that final bit of comfort. You smile, almost at how precious sleep feels in a world so rarely quiet. Here, for a few hours, there are no judgments, no errands, no drafts. There is only rest. A soft, dark space where you are no one but yourself. And as you surrender to sleep, you are reminded that, in the 1920s or any era, the real miracle isn't just surviving the day. It's finding a moment at the end of it to let go, to rest, and to gather the strength to rise and do it all again. So you drift, finally, into sleep. A gentle truce with tomorrow. Your bathroom is not so much a room as it is a concept. If you're lucky, you have an outhouse at the end of a mud yard. If you're not, there's a chamber pot and a highly developed ability to ignore smells. Indoor plumbing is a rumor spread by optimists. The ritual of freshening up in the 1920s is a true test of willpower and creative problem-solving. Mornings begin with a groggy pilgrimage. Boots pulled over, socks, across a chilly, damp floor, or if fortune has truly deserted you, across a frostbitten lawn, down a muddy path to the family outhouse. In summer, it's a journey through dew and mosquitoes. In winter, a perilous, soaking odyssey involving slippery steps and air, so cold your breath briefly turns to art. The outhouse itself is a marvel of rustic engineering. Wooden planks with gaps wide enough to let in both the neighbor's gaze and a generous cross-section of local insect life. You try not to dwell on the details. The door doesn't quite close. The latch is more symbolic than functional, and there's a spider the size of a plum claiming squatters' rights in the corner. You bring your own square of newspaper, not for reading, but for the day's truly pressing business. Privacy, of course, is a fantasy. If you have children, they will find you. If you don't, the neighbor's children will suffice. Every creak and sigh of the outhouse is an invitation for curious knocks, giggling siblings, or even an inquiring cat looking for a warm spot. The only time you get true peace is when you least want it. Like when you've forgotten to bring your shawl and your knees are shivering with indignation. In the city, things aren't much better. Apartments with modern amenities might boast a shared hallway toilet, that is, with everyone on your floor. This means calculated timing, awkward greetings, and the communal knowledge of everyone's digestive schedule. The brave wake early for their turn. The unlucky stand shivering in their nightclothes, waiting for Mrs. Benson to finish her daily crossword and unlock the only door to modernity on the block. If you're among the chamber pot crowd, discretion is your best friend. The pot sits beneath the bed or behind a curtain, masquerading as furniture until called to duty. Emptying it is a delicate operation best performed at dawn when the streets are quiet and judgment minimal. You learn to perfect the art of not breathing through your nose and to pray for rain to wash away any evidence before the neighborhood's gossips make their rounds. Bathing is a weekly event, an act of optimism involving a metal tub in the kitchen, a kettle of boiled water, and strict rationing of soap. Children bathe first, then you, if there's any hot water left. The floors get as wet as the bathers, and modesty is maintained only by the speed with which everyone changes in and out of their shifts. You dream of clawfoot tubs and running water, but mostly you make do with a washcloth and the belief that clean is a state of mind. You learn to accept a level of rustic ambience in daily hygiene. Toothbrushing is performed with baking soda and hope. Hands are washed in cold water drawn from the pump, and deodorant is, frankly, a personality trait rather than a product. Perfume, if you can afford it, is deployed strategically, not for seduction, but for survival. In the end, the bathroom situation is about adaptation. You invent routines, ignore discomforts, and marvel at how quickly your standards adjust. Someday, you imagine, plumbing will be everywhere, and people will talk about chamber pots and outhouses the way they now talk about dragons and fairy tales. Until then, you keep a bar of soap handy, a sense of humor closer, and embrace the truth. In the 1920s, cleanliness is never more than an arm's length from adventure. When the chores are done, you gather the children around a squat, humming radio. Everyone leans in to catch a faint, fuzzy comedy hour or jazz show. Assuming the neighbors aren't listening to baseball so loudly, you can't hear anything but the static and the score. The radio isn't just a piece of furniture. It's the heart of the evening, your ticket to distant worlds, and a chance to pretend, for half an hour at least, that your kitchen is a glamorous speakeasy or a fancy hotel ballroom. Or, at the very least, a place where the news comes from, somewhere other than your neighbor's window. The children crowd close, elbows jostling for prime position, and you fiddle with the tuning dial in hopes of banishing the worst of the crackle. The signal comes and goes, like a stubborn cat, deciding whether or not it will grace you with its presence. If you're lucky, the program comes through. A comedy duo with jokes about bootleggers and nosy mothers-in-law, a serial drama about dashing detectives, or a band leader promising the latest hits from Broadway. The kids giggle at the corny sound effects, and you catch yourself smiling when the host's voice slips and he accidentally broadcasts a sneeze to half the city. On jazz nights, the music seems to swirl out of the static, carrying you and your family to a place where time moves a little slower and nobody cares if you're wearing slippers. But the radio hour is not without its hazards. Sometimes the neighbors on one side turn up their baseball game until every at-bat and strikeout is part of your own living room soundtrack. On the other side, Mrs. Finnegan prefers opera, and her wireless is tuned permanently to a soprano who sounds like she's chasing mice through an echoing mansion. You sigh and try to split the difference, angling the radio toward the window, sometimes resorting to adjusting the antenna with a metal spoon for better reception, as advised by absolutely nobody with real electrical knowledge. The radio is a lifeline to the world outside your four walls. News bulletins come in, sometimes cheerful, sometimes ominous. You hear about far-off storms, political speeches, and the latest dance craze sweeping Chicago. Your children listen wide-eyed to stories of explorers, heroes, and inventors, people whose lives seem impossibly grand and whose problems, for at least 1 hour, feel safely distant. Occasionally, you receive a shout-out, a birthday greeting sent in by post, read live on the air by a bored announcer, with the delivery of someone halfway through a cold. The kids cheer, you blush, and for one shining moment, it feels as if you and your family are famous. The glow from the radio's dial casts warm, wobbly shadows on the walls. You share a plate of day-old cookies and listen for the punchlines, the weather report, the gentle thrum of music weaving into the fabric of your home. When the show ends, there's always a collective sigh, as if the whole house has been holding its breath together. As you turn the dial to off, the quiet is almost startling. The children linger, sometimes reenacting a skit or humming a tune, reluctant to let the spell break. You tuck the radio back in its corner, careful with the cord, and feel grateful for this odd little box that brings the world closer, even if it's wrapped in static and occasionally sounds like it's being broadcast from inside a tin can. The radio hour is more than entertainment. It's comfort, community, and the gentle reminder that even in the smallest, noisiest, dustiest house, you're never truly alone. For a few minutes each night, the world shrinks to a circle of faces, the glow of a dial, and stories that, no matter how crackly, promise hope, laughter, and a little music to carry you into sleep. When a child gets a fever, you consult a terrifyingly old bottle of castor oil, a mustard plaster, and the collective wisdom of 3 aunts. The doctor is expensive and prone to recommending things like fresh air and more beef, neither of which are available. In the 1920s, illness in the house means the start of a complex decision-making process. Equal parts intuition, superstition, and rummaging through the medicine cabinet for anything that doesn't look actively haunted. The medicine cabinet, by the way, is more a shelf than a cabinet, with bottles of mysterious origins, faded labels, and the sort of powders and liniments that smell like regret and old shoes. You start by feeling foreheads, the old-fashioned thermometer nowhere to be found since the last time someone used it as a pretend sword. If the child is warm, you do what every responsible parent in this era does. You summon the aunts. They arrive with speed and opinions, each bringing a different diagnosis and at least one dubious cure. Aunt Mabel swears by onion poultices. Aunt Ida is a firm believer in tea made from boiled dandelions. And Aunt Clara thinks a bit of whiskey never hurt anyone. The house fills with the scent of stewing vegetables and ancient remedies. If the illness seems minor, you reach for the home remedies, the true heroes of the age. There's the bottle of castor oil, which cures everything from tummy aches to existential dread, and tastes like liquefied despair. A teaspoonful is administered with the same seriousness as a courtroom sentence. There are hot mustard plasters, slathered and slapped on chests with the hope that the child will be too distracted by the burning to notice their other symptoms. Socks are stuffed with onions, chests rubbed with menthol, and everyone is encouraged to drink water, which means running to the pump in the backyard, even in the middle of the night. Should the malady worsen, you debate the big decision, calling the doctor. This is no small matter, as doctors are paid by the visit, and your wallet is already too thin to handle even the friendliest house call. But sometimes, after enough home remedies, it's clear you need professional help. The doctor arrives with a black bag and the air of someone who would rather be golfing. He asks sensible questions, peers at the child, and offers advice that sounds suspiciously like common sense but is priced like rare wisdom. More sunlight, less worry, and, if possible, an egg a day. He tips his hat, you hand over the last of your cash, and you both pretend this has changed everything. When the children recover, and, miraculously, they usually do, it is attributed to the remedies, the doctor, the aunts, or pure stubbornness, depending on who's telling the story. You air out the rooms, wash the sheets, and hope that the next round of coughs is a long way off. For the worst days, you keep a small stash of peppermint, used both for soothing sore throats and bribing children to swallow something unspeakable. Modern medicine, in all its antiseptic glory, is still a distant dream. Here, in your world, health is a matter of managing symptoms, trusting instincts, and hoping the fever breaks before the laundry pile mutinies. You listen for the night coughs, tuck the covers tight, and keep the water pitcher by the bed. When everyone is finally well, there's a sense of collective triumph. You survived another round of sniffles, aches, and medical guesswork. You put away the castor oil, far back on the shelf, just in case. Thank the aunts, and count your blessings, one for each healthy child, and one more for the miracle of getting through it all with just a few more grey hairs and another story to tell. Because in the 1920s, the pharmacy is mostly your pantry, and the best medicine is a combination of stubborn love, community, and a bit of luck. You scrub faces, brush hair, and wipe shoes, all in an attempt to look presentable for neighbors and Sunday church. Somehow, your children still manage to accumulate mysterious stains moments before you leave the house. Soap is rationed like it's gold dust. Mornings intended for looking presentable are best described as high-stakes theatre. You marshal the children into a line, armed with a washcloth, a cracked bar of soap, and a hairbrush with more bristles missing than intact. The goal: emerge from the house resembling a respectable family, not survivors of an indoor mudslide. Reality, of course, has other plans. Soap is a luxury, carefully shaved into thin slices and hidden on the highest shelf to prevent overzealous children from using it for science experiments in the wash basin. Every scrub is measured, every bubble accounted for. Faces are washed with water so cold it could bring a statue to life. Ears are attacked with maternal vigor. Hair is tamed with water, a dollop of lard if you're desperate, and enough tugging to ensure that at least one child will grumble about hair loss before reaching adulthood. Shoes are wiped, buffed, and arranged like soldiers ready for inspection. Laces are tied, or knotted, or simply wished into submission. At least one child arrives wearing two left shoes, and you make a quick switch, hoping the neighbors won't notice. Dresses are straightened, collars licked and pressed into place, and jackets, if available, are dusted off for the occasion. Never mind if the pockets contain yesterday's sandwich crust. But children are agents of chaos, and cleanliness is a fleeting condition. No sooner do you finish cleaning one face than another reappears with a smudge of jam or a suspiciously green fingerprint. Socks, just pulled up, slouch down again, exposing shins like a secret rebellion. Someone sneezes directly onto someone else's sleeve. And just like that, you're back to square one. Church days and community events are the pinnacle of appearance anxiety. You steel yourself for the judgmental gazes of neighbors who have clearly spent the morning polishing their children with industrial solvents and who will later discuss the state of your children's collars over tea. You deliver stern warnings to avoid puddles, mud, and sticky surfaces, but you know deep down that this is a lost cause. The world outside your front door is a minefield of stains. There is always a last-minute panic. Someone can't find their glove, someone else needs a handkerchief, and the youngest suddenly realizes he's not wearing any shoes at all. You scramble, improvising solutions, one glove for each of two children, an emergency handkerchief fashioned from last year's undershirt, and a borrowed pair of shoes from the neighbor's equally exasperated son. With everyone finally assembled, you do a final once-over, smoothing hair, tucking in loose hems, and sending up a quick prayer that no one will spill anything on themselves before reaching your destination. The parade to church or the store begins. Children marching in imperfect order, heads held high, shoes only slightly mismatched, faces scrubbed until they shine, or at least until the first raindrop hits. Along the way, you perfect the stern mother glare, a look capable of halting minor mischief, at least temporarily. You smile politely at Mrs. Pratt on the corner, bracing yourself for a comment about the good old days, when children never ran wild. You nod at the shopkeeper, pretending not to notice him, glancing at your youngest's muddy knees. Keeping up appearances in the 1920s is an endless battle fought with soap, spit, and hope. Sometimes you win, a compliment on a shining pair of shoes, a neighbor's approving nod. Sometimes you lose, a grass stain, a loose button, or a runaway hair ribbon before you're halfway down the block. But always, you keep trying, determined that, for at least a moment, the world will see the best, cleanest version of your family, even if the illusion only lasts until lunch. And so, you've made it. You've survived a day in the relentless, miraculous, mildly absurd world of a 1920s single mother. You've navigated oatmeal negotiations, industrial noise, drafty rooms, mismatched socks, and the chaos of children with nothing but stubbornness and whatever caffeine was available. You've faced teachers' side-eyes, factory bosses' sighs, neighbors' opinions, and laundry that seemed to multiply overnight. You've done math with a pencil nub and hope, fed a family on a handful of coins, and kept your children warm with second-hand blankets and first-rate resilience. All this without ever pausing long enough to wonder how you do it, because the truth is, you just do, because you have to. And every exhausted, underappreciated mother who walked these cold floors before you, she did it too. She did it not because it was easy, but because there was no alternative. She didn't have online grocery delivery, microwaves, or even a private moment in the bathroom. But she still managed to keep a family afloat in a world that sometimes felt like it was designed to test her limits. So tonight, as you settle into a clean, warm bed, surrounded by silence and the soft hum of your fan, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the mothers and grandmothers who came before, to all those who patched clothes, calmed tears, and faced the world's impossible standards with a sigh and a sense of humor, because their strength made our comfort possible, and their struggles are the foundation for every cozy night we now take for granted. History is full of hardship and hilarity. It's proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and just a little bit ridiculous. So close your eyes, let go of the noise, and rest easy. Tomorrow is coming,